alive, everyone. Truth can be stranger than fiction, and the story we're diving into today is a perfect example of that. We're looking into the case of David Chen.
David Chen.
Yeah, David Chen. He was a prominent figure in Cedar Grove, Connecticut.
Okay, yeah.
His disappearance back in 2018 really shook the community, and it revealed a whole other side to this seemingly peaceful town.
It's amazing, this case, it just keeps unfolding. Every piece reveals something deeper. What looks like a missing person case at first, it quickly becomes this complicated story of financial crimes and betrayal and eventually even murder.
Exactly. And our sources, they describe David Chen as this, picture of success, right?
Yeah.
Successful real estate developer, generous philanthropist, beloved member of the Cedar Grove community. He had it all. Beautiful home. Hosted charity galas. He was even deeply involved in the recovery after that awful flood that hit the town.
Right. But when you connect this to the bigger picture, it's almost like a classic example of how looks can be deceiving. David's projecting this image of success and being involved in the community. But there were cracks, like hints of a more complicated reality underneath.
Yeah, and that's where things get interesting. Our sources reveal that behind this perfect life, David's marriage was actually pretty strained. There are even rumors about arguments with his wife, Elizabeth.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, Elizabeth, his wife. And he started becoming more and more absent from these community events. He even missed important meetings, which for him was totally out of character.
So that makes you wonder then, was David involved in the flood recovery because he really cared? Or was it all just to look good, while his personal life and maybe even his business was falling apart?
That's a really good question. And it leads us to the morning of August 15th, 2018. David starts his day like normal, goes to his office. But then he gets this strange call.
A strange call? What do you mean?
From a burner phone.
Oh, wow.
And this call, it sends him rushing to a storage facility on the outskirts of town.
Interesting. So this storage facility, it becomes a really important place in the investigation.
Yeah.
You see him on the security cameras entering his unit, but there's no footage of him leaving.
Yeah.
And get this, the camera covering the back exit, it malfunctions.
At the exact same time David disappeared.
Exactly.
That's very suspicious.
Very.
So hours go by, and Elizabeth starts to worry. David misses his daughter's piano recital. And for a man who seems so dedicated to his family, that's unheard of. She goes to his office, finds his things untouched, and that's when the alarm bells really start going off.
So the police, were they slow to react at first?
Yeah, maybe because David had this reputation for working late hours, but when they finally start looking into it, they find something really disturbing in David's storage unit.
What, like a clue?
His briefcase.
His briefcase.
And it wasn't just any briefcase, filled with work stuff. This briefcase was full of secrets. Documents showing a whole secret financial life, shell companies, accounts in the Cayman Islands, a whole world he hid from everyone, even Elizabeth.
Wow. So this is suggesting that he was involved in some pretty shady stuff. But the fact that he kept such detailed records, it suggests that he was either incredibly organized, or maybe he knew how risky this was and was trying to protect himself, like keeping a paper trail in case things went wrong.
Yeah, that's a great point. But there's more. The real shocker was a handwritten note tucked inside the briefcase. It said, "They know. Meeting at the usual place, no choice." And guess what? They found traces of David's blood on it. Chilling.
Wow. Yeah, that changes things. His blood on the note. This isn't a missing person case anymore.
Exactly. This note, it suggests a threat, a forced meeting, and a level of desperation that no one had even considered before.
So who takes over the investigation at this point?
That's when Detective Martinez enters the picture. She's the seasoned investigator from the Financial Crimes Unit, and she immediately sees that this isn't just some ordinary disappearance.
Right, bigger than that.
We're talking about a complex financial web, potentially international.
Exactly. And as they start looking into David's computer, the forensic team, they find even more. They discover all these encrypted files.
Encrypted files? What was in them?
Years of financial transactions, revealing that David was deeply involved in money laundering.
Wait, money laundering. Could you explain that? What does that even mean, and how did David fit into all of this?
Sure. Money laundering is basically disguising where illegal money comes from, making it look clean, like it's from legitimate sources.
Oh, I see.
David, with his real estate business and everything, he probably used all that as a cover to clean dirty money, moving it through these shell companies and offshore accounts.
So the storage facility wasn't just random, it was a key part of this whole operation.
Exactly. They found out that David's unit, Unit 24/7, and several others were being used to drop off large amounts of cash. This cash was then funneled through those shell companies that David set up. Basically, they were cleaning the money, making it almost impossible to trace.
This is where it gets really interesting, right? Remember those security camera malfunctions at the storage facility?
Yeah. Well, investigators discovered that they always seem to happen on the third Thursday of every month. Really? On the third Thursday of every month.
Yeah.
And was there anything else happening on those Thursdays?
They found out that these dates perfectly matched up with huge wire transfers going through David's accounts. It wasn't a coincidence, it was deliberate. They planned it that way to hide the movement of all that illegal money.
Wow. So this was a very sophisticated operation.
And then there's the blood on the note, remember?
Hmm.
It wasn't just David's blood, it was mixed with a rare soil compound. This type of soil, it's only found near these abandoned mines along the coast.
So that changes things. Does that mean David was taken to one of those mines?
That's what investigators started to think. The stakes were rising, the danger was becoming really clear.
This whole thing is just wild.
Then, right when they hit a wall, Elizabeth, David's wife, she decides to come forward. She had a key to a safety deposit box that David had kept secret.
And what was in the box?
Well, that key and what Elizabeth would tell them, it would change everything. It revealed how deep David was in this whole thing, who was really behind it all, and what ultimately happened to him. But we're going to have to wait for part 2 to get into all that. We're back with the deep dive. Last time, things left off with Elizabeth Chen holding a key.
Right. The key to that safety deposit box. The one David kept secret.
A box that could unlock the secrets of his double life. Maybe even tell us what happened to him.
And what Elizabeth found was incredible. It wasn't just cash or jewelry, like you might expect. It was like David's own personal archive of his illegal activities, all meticulously organized.
Really? Like what?
Detailed records of every transaction. Names, dates, locations. It was all there.
So it sounds like he was keeping tabs on the whole money laundering operation, like his own shadow ledger. Do you think he was paranoid? Or was he being smart, protecting himself in case things went bad?
It's a good question. It definitely seems like David knew the kind of game he was playing. He was aware of the risk. But there was something even more important in that box. A USB drive.
A USB drive? What was on it?
It wasn't family photos or anything like that. This drive was full of video footage.
Video footage? Like what?
This was David's insurance policy. He had secretly recorded meetings, conversations, transactions. Basically, he was building a visual record of the entire money laundering operation and everyone involved.
David was playing a dangerous game, wasn't he? Gathering evidence against his own criminal network. He must have known the risks.
Absolutely. It seems like he had a plan, if things went south. And remember, this was all happening while he was living this seemingly perfect life in Cedar Grove.
It's crazy how two different worlds can collide like that.
Exactly.
So Elizabeth's discovery, it gave the investigation a whole new direction. They weren't just chasing shadows anymore.
Right, now they had hard evidence. But David was still missing. And the threat to Elizabeth, it was very real. Remember that note with David's blood on it? And that rare soil they found, the kind that's only near those abandoned mines.
Yeah. Those mines seem like a big piece of the puzzle.
They were. And it was actually a local fisherman who made the next big discovery. He was fishing near the old Pioneer mining complex when he snagged something heavy on his line. It was a waterproof bag.
Wow, what was in it?
Inside, they found David's things. His laptop, his phone, all ruined by the water. But there was one thing that was perfectly fine. Tucked into the lining of the bag was a tiny micro SD card.
A micro SD card. This is like something straight out of a movie. What was on it?
This card was the missing piece of the puzzle. It had the footage from the storage facility security cameras, the footage they thought was lost from that malfunction the day David disappeared.
So they finally got to see what happened to David at the storage facility.
Yes. The footage showed David being confronted by two men. One of them was James Holbrook.
Wait, Holbrook, he was David's colleague, right?
Hmm.
The regional manager at First Century Bank, the same bank connected to all the money laundering.
The very same.
Yeah.
And this is where things get really dark. It turns out Holbrook wasn't just involved, he was the one running the whole operation.
Wow. The respected bank manager, a pillar of the community, turns out he's the mastermind behind this huge criminal scheme.
Exactly. And the footage caught this heated argument between David and Holbrook. Holbrook was demanding access to offshore accounts that only David controlled. And David, he refused. That's when things escalated.
It seems like all that evidence David was gathering, his insurance policy, it backfired.
You're right. That note, they know. It wasn't paranoia. Holbrook and his people knew that David was keeping tabs on them, and they were willing to do whatever it took to protect themselves.
What happened next?
The footage was grainy, but they could hear the audio. David's last words before they forced him into an SUV were, "Elizabeth knows everything. If anything happens to me, it all goes public." That's why Elizabeth was getting those threats. She was the key, the one person who could bring the whole operation down.
It's incredible that Elizabeth came forward knowing she was putting herself in danger.
It took a lot of courage. But sadly, David's warning came too late. Remember that quarry near the coast? The one with the soil they found on the note?
I have a bad feeling about this.
Yeah. A hiker found a shallow grave in that quarry. It was David Chen. He had been murdered.
We're back for the final part of our deep dive. This Cedar Grove case has been a wild ride, uncovering this dark secret under the surface of this seemingly perfect town.
What's really unsettling is how this whole criminal operation went on for so long. Hidden in plain sight, it really makes you think about how well you know the people and systems you deal with every day.
I know, right? We started with this missing person case. David Chen, a respected real estate developer, just vanishes. And then we uncover this whole secret life. Shell companies, offshore accounts, a huge money laundering scheme. And David, the supposed upstanding citizen, he wasn't just involved, he was documenting everything, gathering evidence against his own associates.
It's like a puzzle, trying to figure out his motivations. Why would someone like David, with everything going for him, get involved in something so risky? And then turn against the very people he was working with?
We may never know the answer to that, but one thing's for sure. Both David and Elizabeth, they were incredibly brave. David, even though he was in deep with this criminal network, he tried to protect himself and expose the truth. And Elizabeth, even after everything she went through, she chose to come forward with that key, knowing the evidence could bring those responsible to justice.
Absolutely. Their actions were really important in bringing down this whole criminal network. It went way beyond Cedar Grove. Imagine what would have happened if Elizabeth had stayed silent, if that evidence never came to light.
It's scary to think about. So what happened after they found David's remains?
Well, that discovery, the footage from the microSD card, and Elizabeth's testimony, it was all the police needed. They went after James Holbrook with everything they had, and within weeks, they caught him trying to skip the country.
So, in the end, justice was served.
You could say that. Holbrook was convicted of murder and money laundering, sentenced to 25 years. But his crimes had a much wider impact. They caught 12 other bank employees, even the CEO of First Century Bank, all involved in the scheme. And the bank, a pillar of the Cedar Grove community, it had to shut down. The whole thing left this trail of destruction, both financially and emotionally.
It's amazing how this one case affected so many lives in Cedar Grove. It really shattered the town's sense of trust and security.
This whole case is a reminder that corruption can happen anywhere, even in the most idyllic settings. It shows us how important it is to be aware, to think critically, and to question the things we take for granted. Because sometimes the biggest threats are right there in front of us, hiding behind a mask of respectability.
So, what are the big takeaways here? What should our listeners be thinking about after this deep dive?
This case shows us how complicated people can be. We're capable of great good and terrible evil, and sometimes those impulses exist within the same person. It's also a reminder that courage and truth are powerful forces. David and Elizabeth, they fought against this corrupt system, and they paid a high price for their bravery.
It's a tragic story, really. A reminder that there can be darkness lurking beneath the surface of any community. But it's also a story of resilience, ordinary people doing extraordinary things to expose the truth.
It makes you wonder, how well do we really know the people we surround ourselves with, the institutions we trust, our own communities? And are we willing to question what we think we know, to look deeper, and to speak up against injustice, even when it's hard or dangerous?
That's a powerful message to end on. The Cedar Grove case is a story that will stay with us. It reminds us that people can be deceitful, but it also highlights the incredible courage they can display. It shows how important it is to be aware and to question what we see, because appearances can be deceiving. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll be back next time with another captivating story that explores the complexities of the human experience.